This is the Starting Why podcast. Here we ask entrepreneurs, actors, investors, innovative, and artists on the why they are doing what they are doing, what motivates and drives them, and why can't they stop. We will start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Starting Why. My name is Michelle. Today we have DJ Journey and Ravin with us. Journey and Ravin, how are you?
We're great. How are you? Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Journey and Ravin are co-founders of Formula Creative, and today's topic is why we started a creative design agency. So before we began talking about why you start what you start, what is your story?
Well, the story starts in Chicago, Illinois. For me, the 1% of the situation at Formula starts off in Chicago. Me as a kid, really growing up in a family full of older sisters and seeing how they thought about things and how they really went about life and how strategic they were about planning everything that they did down to their nails and hair. So coming from that sort of situation, I was drawn into the psychological standpoints of how people work and how they inspire others and how they inspire themselves and what kind of makes them do what they choose to do in life. And my mom, she was more into the musical side of things, but she was more into doing music for the aspects of community. So I kind of drawn towards that and became a record collector from there. But it wasn't a record collector to be a DJ. It was kind of a record collector to see how records even came together, the different instruments that made a composition. So it introduced the lifestyle of music. So when looking at the landscape of growing up, I saw the industry, and the industry is a little bit different from, how things are kind of made and put together. It's just kind of the industry of business. So I saw that you end up shaping the form of what you're making to actually fit inside of the boxes and the industries of business. So that kind of changed the way that I thought, but I've always had this standpoint and respect on process. It was all about process, labeling, knowing where things actually came from, even down to the inspirations and so on and so forth. So it led me into radio and other sort of aspects. But from that, moving to New York and also living in LA as well. But New York really, really taught me about there's the creators, there's the maintainers, and then there's the crowd that sits on the other side of that. And I've always gravitated towards the owners, the people who seeded the concept to actually get the supporters on board. So that led me to working with a lot of owners and people that actually really, really made stuff and produced things down to the business plan and so on and so forth, which led me to go into South by Southwest to meet my longtime partner, Ravin Dave. And we kind of met. I saw the way that he worked. He had a relentless, crazy process about doing things, the way that he thought about things. It was more like, wow, you're genius in your ways. I don't know how you do things, but you get things done. And I'm like, wow, I'm all about that part. So we went back to New York, immediately fell into a friendship that we started pulling in all these crazy projects, and it became this thing. But that's sort of the beginning that builds into this agency that we kind of put together based upon 3 individuals with those sort of relentless process superpowers that created the Formula Creative Agency. So I'll stop there and let Dave go into his bit on how this tree became a palm.
Dave, how did it grow?
Action-packed there, man.
Yeah.
A lot there.
It's funny. I think it's like probably like a 20-year cycle. For me, it began, I think, like moving around as a kid and going to a lot of different schools. And, I was always kind of the new kid. And, it's similar to like with this whole like NFT thing and all of that starting. It's a room full of new kids and everyone's got to kind of like race to become like someone and who it is that they are. And then the circles start forming. And then, if you don't hang out and show up in the circle, then you fall out of the circle. And it's just funny how like that kind of stays with us our whole life. And you don't really realize it, maybe necessarily like as you deal with people in person, but I think it's just kind of been a little bit of a lesson. It's interesting. right? It's interesting to think back to that, which when we were younger and what we thought about the future would be. And then now living it, comparing and contrasting where you are to where you were with those expectations. And I think that inquisitiveness and that kind of introspectiveness and that insightfulness and perspective is always kind of what's driven me. And so, like I got involved ever since I can remember. I was like drawing, that was like my escape. I was always afraid of boredom, being bored, and also kind of afraid of work. But I came from a very like workaholic type family. When I was young, up to the day my mom gave birth to me, she was teaching aerobics classes. And at the time she was training Major League Baseball. And so this was in the early 80s. And, aerobics was just becoming a thing. So you had this, woman who was a trainer leading super weird calisthenics during a time when men in a man's sport. So, up until I was born, she was bouncing up and down with me to some beat, some sort of music. And so I think that's probably the origin of where music came from. But even before that, my great grandfather or my grandfather, my other grandfather on my father's side, he was a stand-up bass player, and played music his whole life. And then, his grandfather played music, I think the clarinet from what I heard. So I guess that's where it came from. I think when you're younger, you want to play. And so as I got older, it led to kind of my father being business and running businesses and family businesses, and then my mother being kind of very open-minded and free-spirited and a bit of feminist streak and very kind of driven. And so those two things combined and, out comes an artist that's interested in sports. And so my whole life, it's been a dichotomy. It's been starting your first business when you're 15, going bankrupt when you're 30, having a bunch of different companies in between, working for other people, following your passion, and trying to figure out all along, what it is that your purpose of your existence is. For me, younger, playing a lot of sports, I think gave me the work ethic and taught me how to set my mind on something, to focus on a goal and stay with it. And when you play a season of sports, it's the entirety of time, right? Mm-hmm. From the beginning to end, the preparation to the finish, and then the off time. And you continue to do that year over year over year. It starts to cycle you and train you. And I didn't realize that that's what I was training for. And so I got to the point where, we did a lot of DJing in high school and, learned turntables and, the digital aspect. And I really enjoyed entertaining people. I think that was my most fun. And I loved running business. So that when I got to college, we threw huge, massive parties, thousands of people. I think in one weekend we did 43 kegs and generated over $25,000. It all illegally. But to us, that was kind of the thrill. And then the management, the high of managing 1,000 people in a party that lasted 2.5 days, that's illegal, right? And making sure that no one ends up dead, raped, God forbid, anything bad happen. You're responsible. You're going to jail for a really long time. But that's the fun of it, So always dealing with that, running a fraternity, running a newspaper, and then getting out to the real world and throwing big parties. And then that just kind of landed me in a place of searching for when are you going to grow up and get a real job, right? Had I stuck with throwing parties, I probably would be running a festivals, right? Until again, the pandemic hit and there's no more festivals, right? So instead I focused on running a DJ company and then working my way up into advertising and marketing. And when I got presented with that opportunity, it was are you a creative or a business person? And you're well, I'm both. Here's my portfolio. Here's my sales numbers. They're well, if you want to participate in this world, and we're happy to have you in this world, but if you want to participate in this world, you have to pick one. You can't be both. Both do not exist in this ecosystem. So I picked the one that I was least passionate about. Even though I love business and I love art, business came second to me. Art is something that just came to me naturally. So business was the harder one, and that would be the harder one to learn as I got older and got more set in my ways. And my father went back to business school when he got older. But it was one of those things where I said, you know what, let me just do this now. And this is my business school. So I spent the next 10 years learning project management, building apps, running websites, running huge national campaigns with a bunch of 20-something-year-olds, working on some of the largest brands in the world, managing a $40 million budget for $1 billion brand, at 26 years old. And it was kind of wild. I started off in tobacco, and then U.S. Smokeless Tobacco sold to Altria for $9.8 billion. Like, that was a wild ride. Like, I'd be in boardrooms with 30 people, 2 people deep. And in the beginning of the ride, like, you're back against the wall. By the end of the ride, and they're selling that account, you're sitting at the table as the young millennial explaining to them why they need to be marketing to 21-year-olds in this way because you were 26, So it was like crazy to have that level of boardroom access. Whereas I felt like I was getting my MBA, when they bring out the bottom lines and the balance sheets. Like, I learned how to read a balance sheet sitting in a boardroom, surrounded by people that were a hell of a lot smarter than me. And the reason I got there was purely because I had a drive to figure out what this thing was about and prove to everyone that, sure, I can get a real job, but I really want to be a creative. And so I think that's ultimately was the departure when I left Heineken and met Journey the same day. I was in South by Southwest, flew to New York. They're like, yo, we need to talk. I'm like, absolutely. At that point, I was kind of sneaking off and writing music 24/7. And I was just over it. Like, the ride was done, and they knew it and I knew it. We separated, shook hands, signed agreements. I jumped back on a plane, flew back to South by Southwest, landed there at 8:00, 8:45, 9:00, back in downtown Austin. 2 a.m., I meet Journey. And then from there on, that began, this 8-year journey, so to speak, no pun intended, of us building what we've been building towards now. And ultimately, Formula became a next piece of that process. In New York, we ran different things. And I think ultimately what we aligned on, for our intention, and it was Madonna's first manager, Camille Barbone, I think, that said this to us. It was like, when you find your intention, the truth becomes effortless. And what is it that your intention is? And for me, it was figuring out how to be a creative executive, how to take business and how to take creativity and put them together and do so over the course of a career, that we create a path that can be replicated by others, that saves them a lot of time, effort, and pain, and providing a way to become a creative professional the same way that you can become a creative professional in the world of, I don't know, or not creative professional, but like professional doctor or a professional, any number, a lawyer, or a business person for that matter. So how do you become a professional creative? What is that process? How did you get there? How did you succeed? And coming up with a sustainable way to be able to operate. And that led me, through New York City for a decade, into California, staying connected with Journey. We came here to start a music studio, to start a content studio, and ended up moving studios and starting a new partnership with an amazing fashion photographer who's originally born in Russia and came together with an idea and a bunch of other talented people, and the idea was to create an agency that had that small time feel of being friends, like us, having a relationship with those who you work with and really building that relationship with your client from the inside out and growing with them as they grow their business. And then as that was forming, the opportunity came up, and suddenly we ended up at a Greystone Mansion as a result of a radio show that we'd been doing for years that Journey's been leading with Trip Digital. And that I skipped over a whole period of time where we spent 7-8 years writing records and producing music and living in New York City and Gramercy and, running a studio out of there. And that's a whole nother podcast and chapter in itself. All those stories are captured in probably about 300 records that Journey's put out and 40 or 50 that we've put out on that project. And it just led us to a place where suddenly there was an opportunity with a brand that was starting up. And I think we needed money, but we also needed a purpose. And we also had this new idea of wanting to create this new company. And all of a sudden came together in August of 2019. And the next thing you know, we had a client in alcohol and they were starting a new brand, and we came across them and suddenly just grabbed a glass of wine and was like, hey, you want some weed? And you're like, that's pretty funny. Does it have weed in it? No. Like, okay, well, try it. And then you tried it. And the next thing you know, this is crazy. And so you bring it over to Journey, and he's drinking some. And then Catherine's drinking some. And then our friend Gwen's drinking some. And then we're getting drunk off some. And then I don't know. It was just like hungry for business. And then Kat went over, struck up a conversation. And then following that conversation, there finds out that there's other deeper connections involved there with previous projects that Journey was working on. And, just a whole can of worms. And from there, we just kind of showed up and carved out. That was actually the managing partner who was just calling through, but carved out a place to really help them do something that they were starting up and doing, that we had experience doing certain aspects of. Figured that we could bring a bunch of value to the table to help them get to where they needed to get to, regardless of what the situation was on the front end of the deal. And we jumped in, and since have designed a lot of packaging, just a lot of just opportunities. And suddenly the pandemic hit, and fast forward through that, NFTs blew up. And now here we are running a design company doing packaging. We did some stuff for Walmart this past year. We have another brand that we're in the process of working on, like that's little baby, like energy, immunity shot. Awesome. And so it's just been super incredible that you go one way and then suddenly opportunity comes and you pivot this way. And then some major thing happens and you fast forward. And now here we are without necessarily that intention, but it became effortless in a certain way.
What is your purpose?
To make it easier for the next generation of creatives to find that balance between creative and business, because I think creativity can help solve a lot of business challenges. And that's a missing link within the world of tech, business, and creativity. It's something Jobs understood and Apple did well, which helped lead them to where they are. That's the power of design and creativity, of when it meets technology and business. Which is, where they are. I mean, I bought that stock when it was $17. Everyone thought it was going to die. What?
Awesome. And throughout your journey of starting this creative design agency, are there moments when you get really scared?
I'll take that. No. as personally, no, because it really comes down to trusting your instinct. There's always going to be new things that come into the market, and new bubbles and new technology and so on and so forth. Everything new is going to happen. But one thing that I think Dave and I are very, very keen on is being sourced in a very, very well put together family sort of oriented situation where we can grow our branches. We can branch off into package building. We can branch off into different things and, the metaverse and, other sort of exciting things that kind of are rooted in where we come from. I never did anything without technology, so I call myself a technologist. Mm-hmm. If my job entails computing and coding and programming, then I'm probably a technologist. And from day one that I've done anything that had anything to do with producing any artists or records or anything like that, or doing remixes and programming radio shows and so on and so forth, it always was driven by technology. And that's what I'm sourced in. But the why and where we come from is not, the fear is the outside voices of you can't do it or it's hard or anything like that. And I think that we built something that came from a truthful manner of roads crossing. And Dave didn't even add this, but when I met him, I was at a point of like managing myself in New York and so on and so forth, handling my own business, putting people together, sourcing people in and out of certain opportunities and situations. So I've always been in business and he's been at this crossroad of like art and everything. So I think we met each other. It wasn't a hard sort of transition to actually lose those tools to gain others, or to lose those tools and go into this art world of not caring and not getting up at 5 a.m. and so on and so forth. I was more of a structured sort of person. So I guess it was easier to actually mesh with personalities and so on and so forth. So as far as like the fear is concerned, it only comes from, not understanding. And if we know that we're going to be learning for the rest of our lives, you shouldn't be scared of new things that you have to put yourself into or throw yourself into a new program to learn. So, and that's not the way that I guess we were raised anyway. We're just not raised to be scared of anything. I mean, you're going to die from something. So you might as well live your life 100%, be as honest as you can, show up, work as hard as you want to, deliver on time, and all those other things that makes a great person. And I think we're not defined by our work. We're not defined by the work that we do. We're defined by the people who we are at the end of the day. We can look back at our day and say, how many people did you help today? How many people did you give information to? And did you work out and, get that salutation in before you started your day? So it's more of, and you can see other CEOs that have, worked themselves into these regimens and these rituals, if you will, to actually be successful. And success doesn't start with the business. It starts with what you do before you even decide to create a business that will provide, in our case, design solutions and so on and so forth. So I think we finally got a chance to build something from ground floor level that we've been talking about for the past 8 years that we can throw our full selves in. It doesn't have to be void of music or devoid of design or devoid of spreadsheets. It's everything inclusive, and we can be who we want to be, and we can find talent that are just more talented than dancing and singing. We can say, hey, you can be whatever you want to be inside of this sort of thing, because it's going to take a hunter-gatherer sort of mentality to actually survive the next 10 years. So be as well as you want to at everything, but also be a professional when it's time to. Mm-hmm. So
I wanted to, since you talk about the external and you refer a little bit to the internal or the physical. So what is your core being, and how are you, like just the way you are, the being, right? How are you extending that to your business and your creative design agency?
The core being is, if it didn't happen, it's not yours. If you wasn't a part of it, and you can't claim it. So it's more of actually getting the experience to qualify you in a certain space. So we look at a lot of things when it comes to working with people, and most of our relationships, even down to the fact that we started this company, it was based upon some sort of friendship, some sort of crossing the paths that we had going on with this person, and we found our niche together. And now we're scaling that and making money from it. So I think the core part of it is relationships. It's real relationships that you build over time. You've deposited, some time into that bank of relationships to get to a point of like, hey, I want to become a millionaire with you, or we want to do $1 billion things together because I can trust that Dave can get it done if I'm sleeping, or I can get it done when he's doing his thing. So I say relationships, the core thing.
Yeah, I mean, the name came from Catherine, where she was, as a photographer, she runs a photography business, but she also is a certified web developer, Shopify developer, and, knows how to code, and spent years, growing up when she was a kid building computers. And, and then on top of it, like, she's also a director, and then has an amazing team of people that she's worked with over the years that are fantastic, DPs. So that she's hired for creative projects and client projects. And so the idea came in all of these LA-based, creatives that come together to work on different projects, whether it's hair and makeup and whatnot. And it's this core of people, but then, it's also very intimate relationships that you have from the client side. So on one hand, you're sitting there with your client who's paying you for that day and shoot, but the next day you're out to dinner as friends. So that's a very intimate relationship. And even as a DJ through over the years, I DJ'd coming out of college, I DJ'd probably about 50 or 60 weddings related to my fraternity. So at each of those weddings, I made at least a couple grand. So I made $100,000 off of relationships over years, which is crazy. But it was also one of those things where you had to learn how not to give discounts, because you had to keep that, like, there was a certain level of experience that you're bringing. So ultimately, right, that relationship is the absolute core. And then the integrity of how you run your business and how you deliver will dictate what maintains or whether or not you're able to maintain a business friendship relationship with the client. And so the idea became building around that kernel and that insight of what that trust means, that if you can build business out of trust and truth, then therefore, you can build a better relationship, but you can also build a better product in the long run. And then that combined with process. And the idea is that you have a core and then you expand and contract based on needs as different projects come in. And then basically, you look towards doing a model of shared ownership or working towards ownership, right? Because the other issue that this really comes down to, and we had to tackle in terms of on the sound side, is the IP. So when you're creating IP, right, and clients want low costs, so what is that balance of ownership to cost ratio? And the same thing for when people are, working within a company. So, I think to answer your question too before, right, like our confidence in tomorrow is based on our failures of yesterday, right? Yes, we've had success, but there's a lot of failures. So every time you fail, that's something that you can learn and put it forward into something you're going forward or into a solution that you create along the way. And so that's what Formula is really, it's built around relationships. And then it's coming up with a sustainable model, not only from a project management, but from concept to completion of a project so that you can contract or expand as needed to fulfill the needs of that project based on trust in order to keep it on spec, on time, on budget.
Are there any regrets?
No, I mean, yes, personally, I think there's times that like in the very, onset, my emotional intelligence was lacking in certain ways. And I resorted perhaps back to like old school ways of management of which like I was possibly like, I don't know, boardrooms get crazy sometimes. And like, there's a lot of passion that happens behind those and in those meetings. And sometimes like, that needs to stay in the corporate environment. And in a startup, like there's no room for that corporate mentality in a startup.
Yeah. You just have to be agile and just always moving. And so I know that, you do music creative as well. And a lot of people really don't understand the relationship between music and visual art. Is there really a relationship between them? Are they separate? How do you manage that?
There's a lot of relation in music to everything that we do. I mean, and it goes back to, and I'm going to get very bohemian on this, it goes back to harmony. Harmony and balance is super, super important. Have you ever listened to a song that didn't have harmony?
No, not really. That's something that I made.
That's the hard listening. It's like listening to gym shoes in a washing machine. It's like, like, whoa, what is this? That's just noise. If those gym shoes started to harmonize and they tap, boom, 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 it'll be more soothing to the actual listeners. So the harmony of sound creates the song, and the song gives you a template to actually go in visually to paint that harmonic picture. And from there, you get the characters and everything I thought to bring on the storylines and so on and so forth. And it just builds. It's like a tree. A tree has to have this root that's really, really solid in the ground. And most of the tree you don't really see because it's maybe six feet of root in the ground. Yeah. But it starts when it starts peaking. And like I said, I'm getting bohemian on this, but the sound and the harmony creates a song. It's all intertwined. So it's like having artists that don't know that come in and try to make songs. It's not going to work without a producer that's coming in with a sound mind that's listening to everything, giving them the pieces and parts and putting those things together to create this thing that's receptive by these beating hearts in human beings that's really, really sensitive to things that are not harmonic and balanced. it's very, very intertwined. And it's an understanding of, I think music gives us a backdrop of how the world actually works, how relationships works, how business really, really actually come together to flourish, to actually serve these living and human entities that are actually the consumers. So it's all interconnected, whether we know it or not. But subconsciously, I think we all know it because, you get a bad DJ in a room, people are going to leave.
Usually Journey is succinct, but he's long today. I'm gonna summarize up his longness. So the top line here,
Yes.
BAG, BAG, GGGG, AAAABAG, right? That's hot cross buns. Right now, we're going to take that and translate those same notes into digital speak. And so in digital speak, right, if I'm a marketer, that would be, all right, let's see what this says. I would say TV, social, radio, TV, social, radio, billboard, 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 radio, 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 TV, social, radio. And actually, it would be like TV, social, radio, TV, social, radio, 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 social, 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 TV, social, radio, right? And that's hot cross buns in marketing. And the moment I figured that out, that like a Gantt chart was the same as like a keyboard or piano or just like a score, it all clicked. And to me, it's all the same shit, right? So whether or not I'm making like an ad, designing a bottle is the exact same process as writing a song. Like making these, it's all decisions. It's all decisions that you make of where to put certain things. And that's just making stuff. Like the same person that made this dongle had to think about all the decisions of all the little pieces that go into all the places. And then you use this standardized, whether you use this one or any of the other ones, right? And so now we have all these thousands of fucking things that are designed. And my goal in life is to design shit that fits better than all of these random devices, like in our world, to make it a better place to live for the next generation of creatives and business like-minded people.
Awesome. And
dongles.
My last question is just in one word, for the next generation of creatives, what is one word that they should remember from your story?
Hashtag just show up.
Okay.
That's one word, right? Because for the hashtag to work, it's got to be one word. That's how you get 3 words into one.
Exactly. I used to say that, yeah, hashtag just show up. But I think from the pandemic, I've changed that and it's kind of graduated to resilience. One word, resilience. Most people don't know what it is. You look it up, you see that you have to be adaptable to any sort of disaster changes that have. It's like you're not a leader if you're not resilient. So
yeah,
resilience.
Maybe it's pivot, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. There's like just flow, man, flow.
Yeah, I think Brene Brown talks a little bit about resilience, and I think Steve Kotner talked a little bit about flow and igniting that fire within or something. Forgot the title.
You got to find that. You got to find that. That's the natural way that motivates you. Like, and that's what it is. Like, it's like failing tons of projects, but how do you get back up and get motivated again? So yeah, resilience and flow. There it is.
And resilience, the definition of resilience is the capability to recover quickly from difficulties, toughness, bounce back.
Completely agree. Just want to thank you guys both, Journey and Ravin, for being here.
Thank you. And hon, we have a wine bottle too that I'm working on that I just realized looks like your background. Like it was one of the concepts.
Oh,
it's
awesome.
Like you see like the gradient of like
the color schemes.
Yeah, the color.
Awesome.
It was like a sunset.
Harmonic.
Star Wars background, I think.
Color harmonics.
That's awesome.
Yeah, color is beautiful. That means color was on because I'm like, you naturally had it in your background and you're always on point. So I'm like, oh shit, color. My background looks like her background. I'm like, okay, we're on point.
Thank you.
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome.
See you tomorrow.
Yes, we'll see you tomorrow. We're gonna go track Justin down, I guess, to see if we can get a get into this new space to see what we're looking at.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, bye. Peace.